Welcome to Living with Purpose. And I have a very dear friend and somebody that I admire who's done some amazing work in the social impact space, Jessica Rothenberg-Aalami. She is the founder and CEO of CellEd, and she's going to talk to you about her journey from, I don't know, living in California, doing some cool stuff, and then becoming a CEO of a startup, which is no longer a startup. It's actually now over 10 years old. So, with that, please join me in welcoming Jessica. Jessica, welcome to Living with Purpose.
Thank you, Akhtar. It's so great to be with you today, and thanks for the invite. I really appreciate it.
Take us through your journey, growing up, doing all sorts of funny things with your incredibly cool architect parents, designer parents.
Thank you for starting with the parents, because that's where I usually like to start. I'm one of the lucky ones who was raised by artists. And for anybody who's raised by artists, you look at the world a little differently, because especially in the United States, it's not that easy to make your way as an artist and sustain as an artist, but still committed to really thinking about the ways we can bring together storytelling, visual art, music in a way that shows the world in a whole other plane. And I'm really fortunate that that was my first language, was music. And my father is also a painter, my mother a sculptor, a ceramicist. But we grew up on the road. It was a mint green school bus, and my 5 brothers and sisters and I would town to town and make our way there for about 6 months. I'd be in the school system for about that time, and then we moved to the next place. So what I got to see was just an incredible variety of way people live their lives in the US. I really took that to heart. So my journey started really mobile, being on the road and getting a chance to see how people live. It gave me a deep appreciation for their stories. And so when I was on my own at 15 and back in the Silicon Valley, where I was born in Palo Alto, it was clear if I grew up mobile and mobile learning, how could I make sure that I could do more in the space of mobile learning? And that's what brought me to tech and the role of mobile learning and how that can effectively connect people to the stories and the opportunities they need to thrive. And that's really what created CellEd, actually, is a culmination of all those journeys.
Fill in a little bit more these journeys that you had, right? So you spent time at Berkeley, you did some fabulous work with corporations, focused on really getting them to think about their strategic impact, their social impact. And you did a lot of very seminal research at that time in the early 2000s that actually set some of the stage for how these large companies were thinking about labor, offshoring. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, definitely. I think, how does it really work? How does power, money work? As even an undergraduate, it was always around, how can we bridge the gaps? How can we better understand the have and have nots? So I was very fortunate to be able to go to the University of California as an undergraduate, get a master's at the University of Oregon on international studies to forge a peacetime friendship with Vietnam before we normalized relations, working closely with the indigenous cultural survival groups in the US and taking teams both to and from, and a collaborative field school that took me to a graduate program and a doctoral program that allowed me to trace the Nike shoe from design to market in 8 countries, that then exposed me to the role of major multinational technology companies and their role in driving the global economy. Had an opportunity to work with the United Nations, had a chance to work with major multinational corporations, Microsoft, to really better understand emerging markets and the role of affordable, accessible, and meaningful technologies that could, in fact, impact the majority of the world's population. So that's always been my focal point. How do we co-design solutions that matter to the world's majority, to the majority workforce? And let's force those connections between companies, between not-for-profit organizations, between academic institutions, multilateral and bilateral organizations that we could really start to see some initiatives that would take hold. And I think that's where working and writing and also practicing the real work every day comes to play. And that's what I've been doing, fortunately, as an entrepreneur, as an academic, as a collaborator, and hopefully as a creator in this space of bridging the gaps for those who need it most.
And we'll come to CELED and how you got to CELED, and you kind of shared a little bit of your initial journey of this whole mobile learning. And I actually didn't know that kind of became the genesis of CELED. But you sit in Palo Alto.
Yep.
That's where everything happens.
Where I was born. So
and there you were born. Right? You are a little Palo Alto baby.
I am, but I'm the least likely person to be, have a company based in Palo Alto because you know best, Doctor. We spent all this time in the field in over 40 countries to better understand the needs of hardworking people and how to create these feedback loops between those folks who want more solutions to their problems and collaborations and those sites where a lot of these innovations are taking place, like Palo Alto. How do we get those bridges? We were doing that, you and I, physically going to and from, but in a lot of ways, Palo Alto is insulated, still not asking the hardest questions around the innovations and the money that is really concentrated here about what we can do for the greatest good. What of a lot of the innovations that have come from this place have actually been not working well, and in fact, creating a lot of damage globally? What's our responsibility in the field of innovation and commercialization to make sure our products and services are actually meeting real needs? And I don't think that's really the conversations that we have in this area. And one reason why I'm still based here to have those conversations, those critical conversations about the role of tech.
I know that you a stone's throw away from all these ultra crazy guys that live there. Not crazy, but I mean, people who are actually
the bros,
right?
Yeah,
you
the bros,
right next to them.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, everybody is a stone's throw away from them. Across the street used to be Jobs, and there's Zuckerberg, and there is all of these folks that are all around you. What is the conversation that is happening in these spaces in Palo Alto around how they see the role of technology in humanity?
The lack of conversation is what I continue to see in my area. And for better or worse, I call it shallow alto. And I think there's a narrow form of success, right? You see it in the public school system in our area that success is so unattainable for a majority of folks, what's seen as a success model, right? It's the amount of wealth you earn or the types of degrees at prestigious institutions, but it doesn't give you all of the possibilities out there for you to live a meaningful life, a purpose-filled life. That comes in all shapes and sizes. It's not just because you see a few lucky winners in this casino capitalism of big tech, where a lot of the money was already predetermined. It was already going to go to those folks who had that access and privilege in the first place. So I think the critical conversations aren't happening. But what I do see a lot of is a lot of patting themselves on the back for successes without actually listing the unintended consequences of those very same innovations. So I think I would just like to see a fair portrait, a true portrait of my area.
And CELED is doing that, right? So this is just a great way to segue into CELED. So talk a little bit about why CELED, your journey with CELED, and what it is, where it is now.
I think that was just trying to tell the truth, right? I think that's where CELEDS, which stands for Cell Phone-Based Education and Coaching. What we did a little bit differently back in 2014 when we launched is focused on the majority workforce. If they have access to the information and skills they need to thrive, wouldn't all individuals families and communities be better off. So focus on the needs of the folks that aren't gaining access. So we focused on adults who had functional literacy gaps, which made it difficult to apply for a job, made it difficult to open a bank account, made it nearly impossible for you to navigate the education systems. It just happens to affect well over 1 in 3 Americans, which I think people are surprised about. And globally, the majority. So what we did is, what if you designed information that's accessible and interesting, that's available over a feature phone that doesn't require internet, that it's recorded lessons like mini podcasts that are available to anyone, that if they stack can get to a certificate or help enable a pathway to a better job, better health, and make it free. And if that's where we started, what would that mean? And it really makes a difference because the systems that have to support people aren't designed to bridge functional literacy gaps. So when you're logging in to a website or you're applying for a job, most of those materials are written at a high school or college level or above. When we have a lot of folks who are understanding information at about a 3rd to 6th grade level. So make information accessible, meaningful, relevant, and available over texting, over a phone. And then we could start to bridge some of those access gaps.
Talk a little bit about your success and impact, and then we'll talk a little bit about purpose.
Well, I think we're very proud of the fact that we started with adults who couldn't read in their first language of Spanish, made that available to folks. Then to truly bridge one of the hardest gaps, then we were able to work now across 50 countries and reached about 10 million folks, which has been very exciting for us because we think it's unlimited. Our goal was to reach 1 billion. So we have a long way to go. What we're proud of is that it's all based on user needs and feedback and collaborations that you need on the ground, in the field, and with partners to make it happen. It's these little bits of innovation that we all do together that can bridge some enormous gaps, especially when there's an intentional way of reaching, engaging people who need it most.
That's lovely. So let's talk a little bit about purpose and why purpose is important to you and how you use purpose,
critical.
especially when times get difficult.
Well, I think purpose for me, it's always been the day job. So living one's purpose is the day job, because imagine parking it until after hours, right? That would be a tough day. When you're living with your purpose and can do that all day long, I believe you live the best life. I've been extraordinarily privileged to be able to have lived my hopes and dreams since day one. And I think that commitment, that belief, it gives me a lot of joy. I think a lot of people hope to find it at some point in life instead of right today, live it moment to moment. And for me, purpose is doing my part and not adding to the cruelty that we see out there. And that you asked about, like the golden nugget, how I keep doing what I want to do each day with living with purpose, personally and professionally. And I've always followed something I call a belief in 5 doors. 5 doors for me is essentially, if you don't find a way the first time through the front door, find the back door, find the trap door, find any window to get into, but you will find a way to be able to drive your day with purpose. It just takes that a little bit of ingenuity, a little bit of flexibility, and a little bit of laughing at a lot of the failures that come along the way.
What are the failures?
Failure for me, I think I accept that I'm going to go for the gold ring, the boldest idea. And some of them, when you put out an idea, we want to reach 1 billion people in 3 years at CellEd, is what I said in 2014. 3 years, because it should. The way it's designed, it's available over messaging, over any phone worldwide. Why couldn't it just be that easy? And then you discover, well, when I started telling folks about the idea, you get a lot of the naysayers. That's not possible. Why would you want to focus on on folks who live below the poverty line. Why would that be important to you? Not go for the big money. So what I found is the failure is, how bold and aggressive is where I continually get pushed back. But I could do it anyway. I'm going to keep pushing. But I do see that, how bold and aggressive I am in a lot of my hopes around not only what I do personally, but professionally.
I love this analogy of the 5 doors. There is really no such thing as a no. There is always an opportunity to turn a no into a yes.
Agreed.
And it doesn't have to be a full yes, it could be a maybe.
Yeah.
And maybe is a good start to move forward. And I believe that purpose is that driver, that little engine, that little thing, that ball of energy that keeps you seeking for that next space of entry, that next space where another conversation can take place.
Totally.
And a space that can actually help that conversation to multiply by one and multiply by another one. So, Jessica, thank you very much for being part of this podcast. Your analogy, your one golden nugget. Remember, everyone, 5 doors. Keep searching. One of them is going to be unlocked. Or at times, just crash through it.
It might be a skylight you crash through.
Here we go. With that, thank you all very much. Again, our goal, our purpose with this podcast at Living with Purpose is to ensure that every single person on this planet gets the opportunity to really start articulating their purpose and living a life of purpose. And as Jessica said, something that you do afterwards. Purpose is with how you show up in life every day, every time, every place. Thank you very much for joining us on this edition of Living with Purpose. See you on the next version. Thank you very much, Jessica.
Thank you, Akshay.